Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Dime a Dozen. I'm Jason Moore here with MTGOacademy.com. We just finished up this daily event, but I'd like to intro the deck here, give you a brief deck tech to talk about what this deck does and how it does it. As you can see, this is an Affinity deck, similar to the one we piloted a couple episodes back, except I've made some distinct changes to this deck. Some of the things I noticed with the previous list was that I tended to get flooded during games, and I also tended to get color screwed during games, and it was very frustrating, and I felt like the deck wasn't as tuned or as effective as it should be, especially because this deck is very good at being powerful, doing things that are hard to stop, and just bowling opponents over. So what I did was I cut a land. We're now playing 19 lands rather than 20. And I cut a color. We were playing as a 4-color deck, and now we're just a 3-color deck. We're a rug Affinity deck. And I think that is helping with the consistency. We're not losing a ton. The core tenets of the strategy do not change just because we're dropping a color. So we retain the red, the green, and the blue elements of this Affinity list. So Affinity is interesting because it's part aggro, part mid-range, part combo. It wins most of the games through a creature beatdown strategy. We're playing 20 creatures here, and a lot of these creatures are very undercosted because of the Affinity mechanic. We're playing a lot of Affinity for artifact, spells, and ability and creatures. So their casting cost is reduced as the game goes on. So we're playing 4/4s for 2 mana or less. We're playing 2/2s for nothing. We're playing 3/2 flyers for blue, which is not too uncommon nowadays because of Delver, but we get to play that also in this deck. We're also playing 4 damage burn spells at instant speed for red and divinations for blue, which is just super impressive here, and it can swing games so quickly. Now, the part that makes this mid-range is because our creatures are so big. They are bigger than the other creature decks in the format, so we tend to have a mid-range role against those more aggressive decks. The combo element, not only based on the Affinity mechanic, but this deck is able to win through the combination of a Tog and Fling, which I will talk about in just a second. So we can win games out of nowhere, essentially killing an opponent from double-digit life totals, which is very impressive once again. So there are a lot of benefits to playing this deck. There are some disadvantages as well, which you'll probably see during some of the games, and I'll talk about in just a moment here. But why don't we go ahead and get into the individual card choices. So the land base is 19 lands. We're playing all artifact lands here. So this is really one of the crucial elements of the strategy because it builds us up to Metalcraft and it makes all of our spells extremely cheap. We're playing 4 copies of Darksteel Citadel. Because we don't have that 4th color, we really only need 4 ofs for the red land, the blue land, and the green land. The other lands doesn't really matter which ones we play, so I opted to play these 4 indestructible ones, even though they make colorless, because we want to keep our mana at least somewhat resistant to artifact destruction. For Tree of Tales is the green artifact land from Mirrodin. We're playing 4 Great Furnace, the red artifact land from Mirrodin. And 3 Vault of Whispers. This is the black artifact land. I decided to bluff that we're playing black in this deck. I don't know if it's really going to make a difference. It might sort of fool the opponent into boarding against Disciple and other similar effects, maybe against Duress or something like that, when we don't have any of those things in our deck whatsoever. So maybe it works. It's really just here because we needed more lands and we wanted artifact lands. And for Seat of the Synod, the blue artifact land. So you'll notice that because all of these lands produce different types of mana, the mana base itself is one of the inconsistent parts of the deck, and it's why I needed to reduce this to a 3-color configuration. So we need things to supplement this color production, and we have 11 turn 1 artifacts that are colorless that can help us with that. We've got 4 Chromatic Star. This is a one-time use, so it will get us color temporarily, but also replaces itself because it's going to draw a card. Also, when we sacrifice this to a Tog's activated ability, we will also draw a card, which is a nice benefit. We're also playing 4 Springleaf Drum, and this helps us. It's a bit of a ramp card as well as a mana fixer. So we can play this on turn 1, we can play a creature on turn 2, and activate this Springleaf Drum to play something else. And that can lead to some of the more explosive starts. I think the main thing is you really want to have a turn 1 artifact if you can help it. And for that reason, we're also playing 3 Terrarian. And this is a card I never played before until very recently. I wanted to try it out. It works great. It's, first of all, 1 mana rather than 2. And so it's cheaper to cast than Prophetic Prism. You don't get to activate it immediately, but if you're playing it on turn 1, it really doesn't matter anyway. And then this one is similar to Chromatic Star, but it gives you 2 colors to your pool, so it helps with fixing even more if you need to cast a Forger and a blue spell or a red spell or something. And then it also triggers and draws a card when you sacrifice it to a Tog. So it has a lot of utility here. Again, it's another one-use spell, but it replaces itself, so it's never miserable. And I think the benefits outweigh the negatives. Since we cut a land, this extra Terrarian, this 3rd copy, ended up coming in, and I've been pretty happy with that number. For Galvanic Blast, this is, with Metalcraft, the best burn spell in the format, probably, at least at a low cost. When you talk about X spells and Rolling Thunder, that's a whole other can of worms, but in terms of just efficient burn, this card is crazy. It kills people from out of nowhere, kills pretty much every creature outside of a Tog and Ulamog's Crusher. So it's just super powerful to have this. You have access to this. You have Metalcraft turned on by turn 2 or turn 3 usually. And from there, this is just going to kill everything and everyone. For Carapace Forger, it's a 4/4 for 2 mana. Nothing really to talk about here. It's very straightforward. It's a beatdown card, and that's pretty much it. It's a little soft to things that have protection from green or from monocolored, but other than that, it really does its job, and it does it pretty well. For a Tog, this is the biggest creature in the format, and it costs 2 mana. This guy, first of all, I really like the Mirrodin art. I'm very partial to it. I don't like the old school art, so I'm glad I'm playing this copy of the card. This guy's better in the late game. Obviously, when you have spare lands to sack, you have spare artifacts sitting around that aren't doing anything, and he's kind of a must-block creature in a lot of those situations. You got to temper yourself and not go all in on him if there's a chance that you're going to get blown out. So I tend to be way more conservative with this guy than I should, and that's something I'm going to have to kind of work on and develop as things go. But he's obviously an instant kill with Fling, which is the combo piece here. It's not really great as a burn spell, but it is great as a win condition with a Tog. Sometimes if you just need to get in another 4 damage, you can sack the Enforcers or Forgers to it. Does 2 for 1 if they counter it, because you have to sack a creature as well. And I board this out a lot. I tend to board it out against blue decks because they do have counter magic. I don't know if that's correct, but I'm just kind of learning as I go here. So that's what I'm doing for the time being. You'll see that I board this out in pretty much every matchup because we end up facing a lot of blue. Frogmite, as a 2/2 creature, it's not anything to write home about, but what it does here is it really enables the broken starts, because this guy gets active on turn 2, and from there you can really ramp up your artifact count, and being a free spell even as a 2/2 is very nice in this deck because it enables Thoughtcast, it enables Enforcers, Hoverguards, a lot of things. So I don't think this would ever be boarded out, even in the mirror when it's very bad in the mirror because they're going to be playing 4/4s. I think we still leave this in just to keep the artifact count that high and the starts that explosive. Thoughtcast is incredible. It feels really broken to draw 2 for just 1 mana, and it can really draw you into some gas both early and late in the game, which makes it very good when you're playing these attrition matchups, as you tend to do in Pauper. You will be able to get ahead on cards and also just find more answers and find more relevant pieces of your deck than your opponent will. And Somber Hoverguard is here because we cut our 4th color. We could be playing white, we could be playing black, but the deck really is inconsistent and you have to mulligan a lot because your colors are always screwed up. So I've been trying to mitigate that as much as I can, and we've replaced the Auriok Sunchaser with Hoverguard. Now, there's some differences, but overall this is just an evasive beater that's going to clock them for 3, and that's what you want. You know, later in the game, this one's actually even better because it costs less to cast. So this has been a fine inclusion. I'm not super excited about it, but it's also just doing the job it needs to, and that's kind of what all of these cards are good at. They serve a role and they do them well. Enforcer is very similar to Carapace Foresters. Sometimes it's free and you can bait out other counters and then drop a couple of these. It feels really broken to drop 2 or 3 of these in a single turn, and it's kind of fun actually. I'm starting to like it. So you'll notice that this deck has a lot of different elements, and that can be good and bad. It's got a lot of big, threatening creatures that have to be dealt with, or they're just going to demolish the opponent's life total. But it also has other elements. It has some burn in the form of Galvanic Blast and Fling. It has some color fixing and ramp, and it has card draw built in. And so when these pieces come together, it's a very threatening deck. It's a force to be reckoned with. But when these pieces are a little bit scattered or not so cohesive, that's when you start to have problems, and that's when you have to mulligan. That's when your deck kind of peters out on you. So those are some of the pros and cons of the deck. Let's go ahead and look at the sideboard just real quick, and then we'll jump right into these matches. There's 3 copies of Ancient Grudge. This is going to be for the mirror match. I will also bring it in against other decks that like artifacts, perhaps the White Weenie matchup, but not a whole lot else aside from that. I think I just wanted to have something that's very good in the mirror, and this is in our colors. It's the best artifact hate card available in these colors, so that's why it's there. 3 copies of Curfew. We're no longer playing Standard Bearer, so we have to do something to try and stop the hexproof decks, even if Infect is still around. I should probably mention that this is the first video post-banning of Empty the Warrens, Grapeshot, and Invigorate. So we're not going to see the Grapeshot, Empty the Warrens, Storm decks, and we probably won't see a lot of Infect. But in case there still is some around, and again, to stop the hexproof deck, we're running Curfew. 3 Hydro Blast. This can come in the mirror. It can come in against Goblins, which has been popping up a bit. It can come in against Blue-Red Cloudpost. And I'm not sure what else we'd want it for, but it's good to have, especially when we're playing blue. And then we've got some 1-ups here because I have 3 slots that I'm not sure what I want to do with. We have a copy of Naturalize. This is the only white border card in the deck. And this is just kind of a catch-all, again, for the hexproof deck. It can also hit things like Tortured Existence. It's primarily here because I wanted something to hit enchantments, but we can bring this in the mirror too. It's a 1-for-1 removal spell, but not that exciting otherwise. Single copy of Pillar of Flame. This is to hit Stompy, hit Young Wolves, and also other cards in the format that are a little annoying like Loyal Cathar and Stinkweed Imp. This deck has a problem dealing with Stinkweed Imp with its current configuration, so it's nice to have something that can kind of bail us out, and just as an extra removal spell, it's not too bad there. Pyroblast, one of the best sideboard cards we have. Mono blue fairies, any blue deck, we're pretty much bringing this in, and it's just so good. And then lastly, we have Relic of Progenitus. It's another bullet card we can bring in against graveyard decks, such as Tortured Existence. Now, this is the first daily event since the bannings that I've played, so it'll be really interesting to see what the metagame is like. I don't really have this tuned well enough, and I don't know what to expect going into this, so the card choices may be a bit off. I'd love to hear your feedback. Please enjoy the matches. It was quite an up and down roller coaster, so hopefully that translates over to your experience watching them. And thanks for any feedback. Don't forget to comment and enjoy the videos.